Good day, Ross Jason Poem Live. This is November the 3rd, 2017. Well, little update on poverty. Justin Trudeau said in his campaign speech, lift poverty out of poverty, and so forth. I'm going to start out with that, then with the United Nations speech about years ago on how poverty is poverty in Canada and how it needs to change as well. Our premier of the province, the new one, John, just raised it up $100, which isn't enough. It covers, basically covers my cable bill, so I can do this today, and that's about it. My internet bill is $140 a month. In 10 years, it's about 10 grand. To run a PC for 10 years, you're looking at anywhere from $20,000 to $40,000, depending on the quality of equipment you have hooked up to it. Just figure out your internet cost per year. That's the cost of owning a computer and using it properly. Anyhow, here we go.
Fear of the world beyond our borders. Fear of each other. Well, let me tell you something. Fear makes us weak, not strong. The Prime Minister's job is to bring Canadians together, not to tear us apart. C'est assez d'un gouvernement qui ne nous écoute pas, qui ne nous comprend pas. C'est assez d'un gouvernement qui a une vision étroite de ce que ce pays peut être et doit être. C'est assez d'un Premier ministre qui mise toujours sur la division et la peur plutôt que de rassembler et de rassurer. C'est assez. I have confidence in Canada and in Canadians. We have won tougher fights and solved greater problems in the past than we face today. The people who built Medicare and the Canada Pension Plan are not afraid of doing the hard work it will take to strengthen the middle class and lift Canadians out of poverty. On a toujours été prêt à investir dans notre avenir, à bâtir ensemble. Ben, il est temps qu'on s'y mette. Il est temps que le Canada redevienne le pays de nos ambitions. And let me tell you, my friends, we are the one country in the world that is strong, not in spite of our differences, but because of them. Now, that didn't happen by accident, and it won't continue without leadership. Leadership that works hard every minute of every day to bring Canadians together.
As I said, we've listened to Justin Trudeau say how he wants to lift poverty out of poverty. How do you fix poverty? Well, we have to have a better education. Our K-12 isn't good enough for more than minimum wage. As a youth at 19 or 17, as we're leaving home for the first time, we're infants, learning how to walk as adults now, to pay our own upkeep, to look after our own dwellings, and so forth, to feed ourselves. That's what they are. You're sure not going to push your infant at 2 years old and kick him down to the ground and say, oh, you're 19 now, you're a legally adult, allowed to drink, smoke, and vote. You're not going to lay loose and start punching and pushing them because you didn't do that to your kid at 2 years old when they're trying to walk and stand up, did you? Well, that's called family violence. If you want to neglect your family of the necessities of life that it needs to live by, that's called family violence. So if our Prime Minister and premiers want to neglect the House of Canada, then I think we got a problem, as the United Nations said years ago in this newscast.
Do we have a serious problem with hunger in this country? The United Nations says the answer to that is yes. It sent a special investigator to regions right across Canada. And what he reported today, speaking within earshot of Parliament Hill, no less, has outraged the government. The CBC's Laurie Graham has this story for us tonight from Ottawa. Laurie.
Those comments from the government didn't deter the UN Special Envoy, Peter. He said he wouldn't mince words, and he didn't.
And today we have a large number of Canadians who are unacceptably too poor to feed themselves
This
decently.
problem, but said they're not alone.
We have in this country more than 800,000 households who are considered food insecure, representing between 2 and 3 million individuals, and that we have close to 900,000 people depending on food banks.
During his 11-day tour, DeShooter also visited half a dozen cities. He came armed with statistics, saw the problem firsthand, and still, the government refused to accept his conclusions.
Discredit to the United Nations.
But he was actually here on the invitation of the government. He met with a number of people who depend on food banks to feed their families.
Food is almost non-existent. My monthly income from 3 jobs is just under $2,000 a month. That's my take-home, what I can use towards taking care of
Communities.
I am struck by the desperate situation in which many find themselves. Often, huge communities depend for 80–85% of their members on social assistance in order not to fall in food insecurity.
Canada's health minister took offense to. DeShooter says he'll take his findings and prepare a report, which he'll eventually present to the UN Human Rights Council. Peter?
Laurie, did he recommend anything that we haven't heard before?
Not really, Peter. DeShooter wants a national food strategy, which many groups have been calling for. But perhaps what is new is the international attention the issue is attracting, which the government clearly does not welcome.
In Ottawa tonight.
Well, as I said, the lady in the video, she works 3 jobs, $2,000, and can't make enough. I'll say again, just like the feudal system learned in grade 7, 8 in social studies or history class, it states a serf or slave lived and worked in the kingdom. They were provided a crappy dwelling. All their work was given to the lord or the king, and they got scrapped back. Never owned a thing or never had anything to pass on.
The serfs who belonged to the manors never got rich. They were at the bottom of feudal society because they owned no land. Serfs were not even allowed to move away from a manor without the lord's permission, because his wealth depended on the labor they supplied. The lord rewarded his serfs for the service of their labor by giving them a place to live, a share of the crops they raised, and protection during dangerous times. Because serfs owned no land, they had nothing to pass down from one generation to the next, so their families always remained poor. In their manor villages, they were not even allowed to grind their own grain into flour for bread. Instead, they had to pay to have it ground at the lord's mill. In feudal society, even though serfs produced nearly all the food, did most of the hard labor, and were the largest class of people, they had few rights and almost no opportunity for education. As a result, it was nearly impossible for them to rise above the poverty that ruled their lives.
Well, there we go. We live in serfdom. You know, the craziest thing is the amount of foreign aid we give out to countries. We have all these problems in our country. Policing, military, roads, parks, recreation, leisure time, social structure. We say we're always running out of money. There's never enough for all those things. Schools are always running out of funding for teachers as well. So here's our foreign aid. You can look up the website, Canadian Foreign Aid 2012 or 16, and it pops up. It says stuff like, as an example here, India, $90 million. Pakistan, it says 108. Vietnam, another 100 million. China, a couple more million. And all these other African states, billions. I don't know what else to say. And we really get into it? Here's the example of a lifetime. You'll like this one. All that money we hand them, is this what they're doing with it? That's right. Human rights. Where's our human rights and our freedoms? We live in our world. We get insulted by people in our country that are newcomers or their families have arrived here within 50 years. All they do is insult us, put us down, and say, oh, you should see the poverty in India. You should see the poverty in China. And if, like my stepdad, who's from Hong Kong, China, which used to be British territory, used to say, wait till you get to the real world all the time. Insult and put me down all the time and call me dummy and retard. Well, I can't even look for a job in my country with not finding my wage. I have to go to labor board. Well, my country looks after the laws, the schooling, the degrees and the certificates they hand out, and who gets a business license. If you don't have the degrees and the education, you can't get a business license, saying you're a reputable person to work for. And if I can't get my money from them, that means it's a government coalition, isn't it? By association, because they control all the certificates. Fraud of a certificate or uniform. You say you're a businessman, don't you? You have a business degree or the education to do that? Then where's my money for doing my jobs when I do them? Or my adequate wage because I can't live on minimum wage and raise a family of 5. Me, my wife or girlfriend, and 3 kids if I only have one wage. And by common law, mom and dad have to work and pay their 50-50. Why is that? In the rules of business, it's only what you put in. You're not a shareholder unless you have your 50-50% in if you own a business. When you sell it, you get your whatever you can get out of it, and hopefully you get it back. It's the way it goes. If you expect your kids to pay you money for your mortgage or whatnot, then you better give it back if you're going to have a divorce, because no business or marriage seems to last forever anymore. Gold digging law, hey? Take all the money from your kids, treat them like crap, and give them nothing back in return but grief. Yeah, kick a 3-year-old or 2-year-old down when they're trying to learn to talk and walk. Just like when they're 19 trying to live in society, swim in the water or go for a run and live life. Real common sense. Let's lift this poverty on this country out of the water and bring it back. More military funding, more policing and education, and get some more jobs in the society. Canadians do come first, because if we can't feed our own country first, we got a big problem. And feeding somebody is a job. And a job equals more money, and more money gives you a better life, better education, better food, better clothing, and a better sociability of leisure and people who you hang around with. And in every country, we have rich and poor. And in a nuclear holocaust or an asteroid strike, well, each city is just a pod of people that might survive some type of a disaster. Thank you. This is Ross Jason Boehmlai on November the 3rd, 2017. Family Violence, Canadian Criminal Code Book, Department of Justice, and the United Nations Active Genocide Definitions. Psychologically harming people, and that's all they've done to us for over 20 years.